Hello, Duke fans, and welcome to episode 158 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. It's Tuesday, April 9th, 2019. Well, the season's over, but we have a lot of stuff to get to today. Most importantly being that Tre Jones has announced that he is coming back for his sophomore season. So all that and some of your mailbag questions coming up. But first, of course, I am your host this week. I am Sam Klein. I am coming to you, as I often do, from Durham, North Carolina, the home of the Blue Devils. I am joined, as always, by Donald Wine in Washington, D.C. Donald, good evening.
Good evening, and thank you guys for facilitating this tonight. I was at the DC United game. But guys, fun fact for me, over the weekend, I was in Denver in LA and recently achieved the honor of attending my 100th game for the U.S. men's and women's national teams.
Whoa, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I've had a lot more games in Cameron, but I'm getting there on the soccer side.
And you're committed to it, and you'll stick with it, and you'll see more soccer.
Exactly.
And of course, we have Jason Evans, who's in Atlanta. Jason, hello.
Hey, I'm a little tired because the national championship game ended at 12:30 or something like that last night. Because it went to overtime and because they started the game at 9:30 and because they add extra commercials and extra halftime and we have to listen to Charles Barkley and blah, 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 blah. And it was such an exciting, great game that by the time I had sort of wound down enough to fall asleep, I looked at the clock and it said 1:30. It was bad night.
Don't even get me started. I flew back from LA on a red eye on Sunday night. Did not sleep on the red eye, which I normally do, but I did not sleep on the red eye home on both flights. Went to work straight from the airport to work. Went to a French class to come back to watch that game, and I said I'll fall asleep when that game's over. Nope, 12:30. I was up for over 36 hours. I hated that game last night, but it ended up being a decent game at the end.
I was up till about 2:00 after the game. I was pretty wound up and hanging out with friends. So there you go. No one sleeps.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine if it had been Duke in that game going to overtime and we wouldn't have slept for days?
Can I be blunt? Can I be blunt real quick? If we went to overtime and it was Duke in that game, I would have shit myself. Straight up, I wouldn't even lie.
I would not have been having a good time. I would be having a very, very stressful time if that was Duke in that game. Guys, so speaking of basketball and late nights and waiting up for the news, the big story for Duke fans this weekend really started Saturday night when Tre Jones sent out an Instagram post with a picture of him doing the shrug emoji basically in real life that said year 2, and everyone started freaking out. And then
it said year 2 question mark.
Year 2 question mark.
With a shrug image, an image of him shrugging.
The shrug image and the shrug emoji all in one.
Yeah.
And then the next day, a picture of his jersey hanging in the locker at I don't know if it was at the Sweet 16 or one of the games during March Madness, and with a little heart and a cross your fingers emoji, and everyone was freaking out. And then finally, the main Duke basketball account yesterday sent out made it official that Tre Jones is coming back for his sophomore season. So he'll be the Duke point guard next season. I know that last week when we talked a little bit about sort of where does Duke go from here, that was one of the main points of speculation, is that we weren't sure if Tre Jones was going to be leaving to go to the draft and try to make it in the NBA, or if he was going to give it another shot here in Durham. And it sounds like he's coming back. We haven't actually heard officially that any of the so-called big three of Zion Williamson, RJ Barrett, and Cam Reddish are leaving, but we do know that Tre Jones is coming back, although we assume those other guys are gone. So knowing that bit of roster news, Jason, I'll go to you first. What is your sort of initial reaction to Tre Jones returning, and how do you think it affects the team heading into next season?
Well, I really feel like Duke was a top 15-ish kind of team, maybe top 10, but maybe back into the top 20 if he had not come back. We were a team that had some interesting, very promising recruits. We had some good guys returning. Not guys who'd played huge roles, but guys where you could sort of see how they would build into bigger and bigger roles. But we were a team with a glaring hole, and the glaring hole was at point guard. There was absolutely no one on the roster who looked like they were really a starting ACC caliber point guard. There was lots of different speculation of how Coach K and the coaching staff might deal with this. There was talk about transfers, grad transfers, perhaps getting players to reclassify from an earlier class, from the 2020 class, put them down into the 2019 class and get them to come to Duke early. But none of those answers, none of those ways to plug this hole were nearly as good as plugging it with Tre Jones, the guy who just set the record for a freshman in assist to turnover ratio, breaking his brother's record. Best freshman assist to turnover ratio in Duke history belongs to Tre Jones. And now he's not just going to be a freshman, he's going to be a sophomore. And to me, there's one big thing I want to talk about this, which is I think there's sort of this misnomer out there that Tre was really worried that his draft stock had tumbled and that he wasn't going to be, if he was going to be a first rounder, it was end of the first round, likely he was maybe going to go in the first 10 or so picks of the second round. And so people are like, oh, he came back because, he's going to be in a bad contract situation and not have a chance to, not have as good a chance to make an NBA roster. I think that is wrong. And let me explain why. I agree with those assessments of where his stock was going to be, very late first to early second. But the way the NBA works nowadays, if you look at last year, look at the previous year, guys who go in the first 10 or so picks of the second round, they get guaranteed contracts. Usually it's a 2, maybe a 3-year deal. And the money is pretty similar, not quite, but pretty similar, over $1 million a year, pretty similar to the money you get at the very end of the first round. So from a monetary standpoint, I don't think that there was a huge risk to Tre Jones going into this draft if he'd chosen to go into the draft. So I think the reason Tre Jones came back was blatantly obvious after the Michigan State game. You guys have seen the video in the locker room of Tre Jones crying his eyes out. He loved being a part of the Duke team. He loved wearing the Duke uniform. And I think when he looked deep inside himself and he thought about what his legacy would be at Duke, and I think he probably thought a little bit about his brother who wears a national championship ring on his finger. I think Tre Jones said, I'm not done with this yet. Now, I think that he can really improve his draft stock if he comes back and shoots better. I mean, his three-point shooting percentage was really, really bad. And that was the reason that his stock was, taking a hit in the NBA. If he shoots better, and I'm not talking like he needs to hit it 40%. If he can get to 33 to 35, 36, 37% on his threes, Tre Jones' stock is going through the roof because he's a brilliant distributor. He sees the floor and moves the ball around incredibly well. And he's one of the best defensive players we've ever seen at the position. He is a great defender. So he has those other aspects. If he gets his shooting up a little bit, his stock will improve. But I don't think he came back because of his stock. I say again, I think he came back because he wanted to wear DUKE on his uniform again. Donald,
All right.
am I right?
Donald, do you have any more to say on that?
Well, yeah, I think, in the end, we're talking about Tre Jones and we're talking about a guy who has some things to work on. And usually when guys come back, you're like, hey, it's great that we have it's great we have a distributor. It's great we have a great defender. It's great that we have another leader out there because when a sophomore point guard, he's the floor general. And when you have a floor general come back, that creates consistency. And that means that all these guys that are on the court right now, they know how to deal with Tre Jones. And really, you just have to plug in a couple of new guys and figure out how they can work with Tre Jones on the court, distributing the ball and being the floor general. Jason, you mentioned a lot of the stats about his shooting. Obviously, he can work on the shots. And I hope that he and Alex O'Connell and Jack White and Joey Baker and even Boogie Ellis, when he gets to campus, they're in the gym shooting 500 jump shots a day for the rest of the summer until practice starts, because him developing an outside shot of anything, of any type of significance, is going to be huge for this team. And we're not asking. The great thing about him is he doesn't have to care. He doesn't have to shoot the ball, 10, 11 times a game. He's going to distribute way more than he shoots. But when he gets the ball, I mean, last year from 2-point, he was 48.4%. He was 26.2% from three, and he took 2.9 threes a game. So what that means is if he's going to shoot a little bit more, which as a sophomore, you probably would call him to do just a little bit more, but not too much. If he's shooting over 50% from two, that means we're okay. And if he's going to do that and he can shoot 80% from the free throw line and even get to, like you said, Jason, 30, 35% from 3-point, that's going to translate from where he was at 9 points a game this year to 13 to 15 points a game. That's an extra 4 to 6 points a game. That's going to mean a lot of difference when we're talking about late games. What are our Achilles heels from this year? Hitting 3-pointers at the free throw line. If he can improve in both areas, that is going to only fuel the rest of the team to do better as well. That is going to be the part of the leadership that we're going to need to see from Tre Jones next year.
Yeah, you guys are right. The shooting is the main thing for him. I think that he has demonstrated NBA ready, probably defensive ability, especially on the ball, but even off the ball and sort of operating the defense. I think that we expect him to be a fairly serviceable point guard, in the distribution area, and the shooting is obviously really lacking. That's the part that he needs to improve on, and that's the part that he can improve on. He can, as you said, Donald, he can work on it over the summer. He can get better in the shooting department, and he can prove next season. I think it's fairly straightforward for him to prove to NBA teams that he is ready to make that step. And I think I agree that he's not at this point. In the NBA, if you have a glaring weakness like that, if you can't hit the three and you're expected to play point guard, then other teams are just never going to respect you, and they're going to pack it in, and you're going to be a liability on offense. Tre Jones knows that. I'm sure the coaching staff had discussions with him about it, about what his development plan looks like. And look, not everybody needs to leave for the NBA after a season. Even if you're a 5-star recruit, there are still guys who stick around and make it work. Grayson Allen is playing in the NBA this year, and he was a 5-star recruit who stuck around for 4 years. So
yep,
it's not like that just because Duke has had an abundance of these guys, these one and done guys the last few years, doesn't mean that Tre Jones has to be on that same trajectory. And so it makes sense for him. And look, as Duke fans, we have to be really excited about this. Duke doesn't now have to go, doesn't have to like onboard a new point guard. They don't have to teach a guy, how to make all the looks and run the defense and all the stuff that Coach K expects out of his point guards. They get to bring back a guy who was integral to the team's success this year, who was one of the best players on the floor, just from a consistency standpoint. There was didn't seem to us at least that there was a freshman wall that Tre Jones hit. So having a guy like that back on the roster and being a steadying presence is going to be essential for Duke's success next season, especially as they bring a lot of new guys on from high school and bring a lot of returning players into much more prominent roles than they had this year. Jason, did you have anything else on the Tre Jones thing?
That is exactly what I was going to bring up as my last thought on this was we were going to be very inexperienced again next year in terms of big game experience, playing a large role in important games. We were Jack White, Javin DeLaurier, Alex O'Connell, Marquise Bolden. These guys certainly played in big games, but playing a key role in those games was something that none of them had done. Tre Jones, you don't get more key than being the point guard who initiates the attack and the spearhead of the defense. And Tre Jones returns having played, look, down the stretch, I talked about it at one point. He basically was playing every single minute of competitive games. He only came out if Duke was, blowing the doors off of someone. So he has abundance of experience. And I think that's going to translate to the rest of the team in a very big way. And then I just wanted to say really quickly, point guard, such an important position. And to get great defense from your point guard affects the D all over the rest of the floor. Tre's ability to force opposing point guards to start their offense further out, to not give them room to see the floor and operate and make good entry passes and things like that. It affects the ability of all the other 4 guys on the team, it makes it easier for them to be good defenders. We talk about Duke not being super experienced. We know that Vernon Carey is going to play a lot of minutes. If we get Matthew Hurt, he's probably going to play a lot of minutes. These are not guys who are defensive effort in the post, and having someone really hard for opposing players to make good entry passes and put the ball where guys wants to get it is going to make Carey a better defender, going to make Hurt a better defender, going to make the entire Duke defense better.
Yeah, I agree. And to close it out, I think when we're talking about Tre Jones, really, when I go back to the word consistency, if you look at our national championship teams, very rarely did they involve a inexperienced point guard running the floor. The only one that we're talking about here is the 2015 team, which coincidentally featured Tre's brother Tyus. And even in 2001, when Chris Duhon took the reins, he wasn't the point guard most of the season. He was a guy coming off the bench and providing that cover until one day Coach K said, Nate James, we're going to move you to the bench to be our 6th man. We're going to bring this kid off the bench and start him as point guard. And he facilitated, and that kind of change led this team and kind of sparked this team. With Tre Jones behind the wheel and really being the guy that's, the floor general, that is going to be a consistency that we haven't seen from our position in quite a while. And, I mean, if you think about the point guards that we've had over the years, when's the last time we've had one that's really been there for more than a couple of years that was at that position? It was probably Nolan Smith back in 10 and 11.
And that's, is that even considering Nolan Smith the point guard?
Exactly. Right.
You could say that Nolan Smith was basically only a point guard senior year after Kyrie Irving went down.
Correct. Exactly.
I think you got to go back to Greg Paulus to find the last time Duke had a, returning point guard who played a prominent role. And it's not like Greg Paulus was all that effective in his later years. So yeah,
right.
We haven't seen this in a long time, right, Donald?
Yeah, exactly. And the point of that is, this is a point guard that is our best distributor, our best defender. Those two things are hustle points. Like, I think the one thing that may be difficult next year is he's not going to have a lot of highlight assists because Zion Williamson and RJ Barrett are unlikely to be on this team. But at the end of the day, that defense is going to be what our bread and butter was back in the day. That's what fed a lot of these championship teams, is that our defense fed into our offense. And when our best defender is coming back and is a year older and wiser and is able to teach some of the younger guys and even some of the older guys the type of defense that we have come to expect from Duke teams, that is something that is a really big boost to our team for 2019, 2020.
All right. So I wanted to move on from the Tre Jones discussion because I think we've covered that pretty well. Before we do, I wanted to apologize that I completely forgot to mention our sponsor at the top of the show. Of course, Byrd Campbell, the law firm with offices in Texas and in Florida. Law firm started by 2 Duke alumni and former roommates and longtime Blue Devils, Jamie Campbell and Tucker Byrd. Byrd Campbell, of course, means business. Check out BYRDCAMPBELL.com, birdcampbell.com for more details. So we said last week that this week we wanted to do a little mailbag show, which we are following through on. I don't know how often it is we actually follow through on the promises that we make, but today we are.
I would like to say we don't lie to our fans.
Look, we try not to.
We try not to, but sometimes things get busy. And like last week, we had a lot to cover, and we wanted to discuss a lot of things, but I'm glad, Sam, that we get to do it this week.
So we're doing the mailbag. Of course, if you do want to send us questions, the questions can always come to dbrpodcast@gmail.com. We're going to get to a couple of them here. So I want to start with Jason. Jason, there was one that we got that I think you particularly liked. Why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Sure. This is from a listener named David McInnes. And David said he was rewatching. He wrote this after the season ended. He was rewatching the NC Duke ACC tournament game, and I don't blame him at all for rewatching that. I too have rewatched that. It is a wonderful, wonderful game to watch. And he says he realized that Duke's lucky streak that people talked about a little bit in the NCAA tournament, that it started before the NCAA tournament. He says if you look at our last 9 games, we had an incredibly lucky run. In the last 9 games, Duke went 7-2, and over half of those wins were really fortunate. The games against Wake Forest, UNC, Central Florida, and Virginia Tech were all won when the opposing team missed a very, very makeable shot in the final seconds. And he said, thankfully for Duke, the ball didn't go down. And then finally against Michigan State, our luck ran out. And so that was David McInnes's comment. And he asked us to sort of talk about that luck. And I don't know that I would talk about it other than to say, yeah, David, he is dead on target. When you think about especially that UCF game and we discussed this, I don't know how Aubrey Dawkins' tip doesn't go in, but then the Virginia Tech game right after it, they have a lob at the rim. I don't know how that doesn't go in. Duke was unbelievably fortunate. That Wake Forest game, we should have lost to Wake Forest. We got unfathomably lucky several times in a row, and it kept our season alive and provided some amazing, wonderful moments for us. But it leads me to something else, and it's going to get us into a longer conversation sort of about luck and about success. Gentlemen, Virginia is the national title winners. It's the first time they've won the national title in their history. They may be the luckiest national title winner we've ever seen. In their final 3 games against Purdue, Auburn, and Texas Tech, in all 3 of those games, Virginia trailed inside the final minute. Oh, no, wait. Sorry, inside the final 15 seconds. Virginia trailed, and it looked like they weren't going to win. I went to Ken Palm, and I checked out, he has these graphs, these charts of win percentages at any given moment in the game. Now, unfortunately, he doesn't parse it all the way down to, Mamadou Diatike tips the ball back into the backcourt where Kahee Clark has to grab it because, I'm talking about the game against Purdue when Virginia was down 2 and the clock was running out and Kahee Clark was basically running the wrong direction with the ball because he was chasing it down. If you could track that moment, I think Virginia had less than a 1% chance of winning. But Pomeroy says against Purdue, Virginia had a 9% chance of winning at the very end. Against Auburn, they had only a 4% chance of winning. That's probably the moment where Kyle Guy was taking his 3-pointer that he got fouled on. And against Texas Tech, they had about an 11% chance, 11.7% chance of winning. That's, again, late in the game, probably right before they hit that 3-pointer to tie it up. If you multiply those out, I went ahead and did this. 9% against Purdue, 4% against Auburn, 11.7% against Texas Tech. You multiply those out, you get that for Virginia to win those 3 games, it was only 4 chances in 10,000 that they would do that. They had a 0.042 chance of winning those 3 games, given the circumstances they were in those 3 games. 4 in 10,000. That's just absurd. It's crazy. And yet, Virginia cuts down the nets. Virginia, avenges the loss to a 16 seed last year. And the story is about how great this Virginia team was. Luck plays such a huge role in the one and done NCAA tournament. You've got to have. Now, Virginia got crazy lucky. I can't even imagine how lucky they got to pull out some of those wins. But you got to be really, really good. And then once you're really, really good, I think that you are one of several teams that just has to get lucky. And it's just a matter of who gets lucky at the right moment. I'm not sure there's anything more to it than that. I'm glad that David pointed it out to us. It's unfortunate that Duke didn't have the luck this year, but you know what? Some years we get it. Some years you don't.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about luck, I want to talk about UVA for a second, then I'm going to talk about Duke for a little bit too. You don't have to think about the last 3 games, Jason, to talk about how lucky UVA was. And I'm not saying this to discredit their run to a national title, because to get to a national title, as we all know, is difficult. But when you're looking at what they played a 16 seed, a 9 seed, a 12 seed, a 3 seed, a 5 seed, and a 3 seed to get to that national championship. The only team that they played that was the strongest team that they could possibly face at that given point was their very first game. And remember, they were down 14 points to them in the first half. And that was that 16 seed in Gardner-Webb. So you have that. But here's the thing. We talk about this a lot in football, and it translates to basketball as well. They say you have to have good offense, good defense, good special teams, good coaching, good intangibles. And even after all that, you still need the luck portion of it. And for us, we didn't have that. We had everything else. We had a good offense. We had a good defense. We have the best coach ever. We have the intangibles. The luck did run out against Michigan State. The luck had run out, in my opinion. We've had bad luck all season. Just think about it. How many games did we have a full squad? Very few. We lost the best player in college basketball for 6 games. We lost Tre Jones for a few games. We lost Cam Reddish for a few games due to the flu and due to the knee injuries. We had a lot of games where freak injuries happened. Against UNC twice, we lost a player the first 3 minutes of the game. Those things are all luck, and we didn't have it this year. And it's hard to say that it's anybody's fault because that's what it is. You have to have that in the end, and we didn't have it. And some teams did. You can fast forward to the tournament and go through those games against UCF and Virginia Tech and even Michigan State all you want. But the luck that we had was going in and out the entire year. And it just so happened that our luck ran out at a time that we were, 5 seconds away from possibly going to another Final Four. And who knows what would have happened from there. Because, again, if we'd gotten to that Final Four, maybe luck was on our side. It just wasn't this year. And I think that's all just a part of the game. And it is something that you kind of just have to shake your head because in our minds, we're like, hey, there was a Final Four where all but the team that beat us, we had beaten. There's 3 teams that we had beaten all year. And the only team in there that we hadn't beaten was Michigan State. If we're in Michigan State's place, who knows what would have happened. But that's why they call it basketball, and that's why you play the games.
And
I'll give you another.
I was going to say that it is as the saying goes, it is often better to be lucky than to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Duke was very good this season, but they also had a lot of flaws they could be taken advantage of, or could at least cut the game a way that a team with a lot less talent could keep up with them, and that. As you pointed out, Jason, that's sort of what caught up to them in the tournament, be it if it was going to happen in the UCF game or the Virginia Tech game or finally in the Michigan State game. Duke was always in danger of that. And the luck ran out and it just sort of went the other way, right?
Yeah, well, and I'll tell you, there's one other lucky thing that I want to talk about really quickly regarding this year's Duke team. I think that we were unlucky in our 3-point shooting. And allow me to explain. Look, just a couple of years ago, Luke Kennard, as a freshman, did not shoot well from 3. And you looked at his shot, you looked at his reputation coming into Duke, and you were like, that guy's a better shooter than that. All the ones that sometimes rattle in, they rattled out for him this year. And all the ones that sort of sometimes graze the rim and, bounce off the backboard and go in, none of those went in for him this year. And so he had an unlucky freshman season, and then Luke Kennard had perhaps a lucky sophomore season or a normal sophomore season, but he was lights out from 3 and lights out as a shooter. I think that it's entirely possible, just based on the way they look, when they take their shot, their reputation and things like that, what we've heard about what they did in practice and the such. I think it's very possible that Duke's primary 3-point shooters this year, R.J. Barrett, Cam Reddish, Alex O'Connell, and Jack White. I think that all 4 of those guys had unlucky seasons from 3. If you look over the course of their career, I bet Alex O'Connell, who hit 37% of his threes this year, that dude's going to be above 40% on his threes throughout the rest of his career. Jack White, 27%. Remember, he was over 30, I think, at one point. I guarantee you next year, I'll put money on it right now, Jack White hits 35% of his threes next year. I'm telling you, I've looked at his stroke. I've seen the stats from practices and things like that. We've heard the reports. Jack White is a good 3-point shooter. Cam Reddish hit 1/3 of his threes. This dude's going to drain more than 1/3 of his threes from the NBA 3-point line next year. I really think that's the case. I think Duke got unlucky in all of our guys who are primary 3-point shooters just didn't shoot well from 3 this year.
Yeah, so real quick to end it, If you guys watched One Shining Moment, which was, probably at 1:03 in the on the East Coast, there was a few things that I noticed about that. Those close calls that we had against Virginia Tech and UCF both made One Shining Moment. And there was a lot of other One Shining Moments that were lucky plays. You had the play against Auburn. You had the for Virginia. The shot that Virginia had against Purdue to go to overtime. A lot of these plays, these One Shining Moments, were all lucky plays. And that just tells you that luck was everywhere in the tournament. And sometimes it just doesn't find our team.
All right. So let's go from that question. Thanks again to David McGinnis for that one. Donald, I know that you had also pulled one out that we got. So do you want to go ahead and read that?
So this question is a great question, and it comes from John Blocker, who emailed us. And thank you for this question. Who does you have as your first and second starting five of the 21st century so far? But one rule to make it interesting, the players had to be at Duke for at least 3 years. So, John, we took this question, and when we were discussing it, we realized that we probably, all three of us, have the same 5 to 10 players. And it's just a matter of whether it's going to be what team they're going to be on. So here's what we did. We take your question, and we are going to flip it and make it a draft. Now, rules are, we're going to do the starting five, and we have done a randomizer order. So I have the first pick, Sam has the second pick, Jason drew the third pick, and any guy who has played at least 3 years in a Duke uniform starting and have played after June 1st, 2001, which is the start of the 21st century, they are eligible for contention. So there's really not that many guys that fall under this, but I think each of us can get a starting five that people will make interesting. So, guys.
Hold on, Donald. Did you say June 1st? You meant January 1st. Yes?
I'm sorry, January 1st, 2001. Yes.
Because that would change the equation here.
Yes, January 1st, 2001. So there's a couple guys who probably will be the first two picked that just squeaked in, but we're going to start. And guys, I think I told you we don't lie to the fans, but I definitely lied to you. You guys, the first pick is definitely going to be Shane Battier from me. So no explanation needed. And Sam, who do you got for your first pick?
Yeah, Donald, I knew you were lying. You told us that it wasn't going to be your most obvious pick, and we know that you were going to pick Shane Battier.
Friend of the podcast.
Look, it's a great pick. I'm going to take Jason Williams as my first pick. I think
that is a great pick too.
I can use him at point guard, or I can use him at shooting guard. He sort of operates in both places. So I'm going to take Jason Williams. Jason Evans, not Jason Williams. Jason Evans, who do you have for your first pick in this 21st century draft?
It's not even a debate. There were 3 players who stand out above all the rest, 3 players who I think arguably could go on the all-time starters for a Duke team, not just 21st century. And the third of those guys is JJ Redick.
Yep, that's exactly how I thought this was going to go.
By the way, keep track of positions where your guys are playing, because I don't want you drafting like 4 point guards and then like a small forward. You got to take a center.
Well,
we know.
A starting five could be a starting five. Hey, there are small lineups, there are big lineups. So it all depends on who you draw. The next one for me, I'm going to go, and this is probably the fourth on the list for most people. Sheldon Williams, names in the rafters. I got my center, and the landlord will make you pay your rent. So
I'd like to point out to the audience right now that we are not doing this as a snake. We had a long discussion about this. I am vehemently opposed to the draft order that we are doing. The fact that Donald gets the first and the fourth pick and I get the third and the sixth pick is just blatantly unfair. Had I had the fourth pick, I too would have taken Sheldon Williams.
I also was going to take Sheldon Williams, but guys, we've now picked the 4 dudes who have their jerseys retired. So
now it's going to get interesting.
That's to get interesting.
Yeah.
All right, Sam, what do you got?
All right, here we are in the realm of post jersey retirement guys. And I feel like now that I have Jason Williams, who is obviously quite versatile, I feel like I want to take a bigger guy. There's a few that I think I can choose from. Let's see. I'm gonna take my classmate Kyle Singler, who I feel like I can put in a variety of situations, and he's gonna be successful for me.
All right, that's a good pick. Jason, who you got for your second pick?
So this guy was on my first team, and I'm surprised he's still on the board. I thought he was the 5th best player. Carlos Boozer.
I was going to take that from you if you didn't take it.
See, here's the thing.
Yeah, was I going to give you Shane, Carlos, and Sheldon? No.
We would have infinity dunks. Let's say that way.
That'd be a lot of dunks. I'm not sure how I feel about Carlos Boozer going over Jason in your pick. Carlos Boozer going over Kyle Singler. I feel like Singler's is a lot more versatile, but there we go.
I don't need versatile. I'm going to have 5 great players every position. Carlos Boozer will play power forward for me and will destroy you.
Yeah. So my third pick is going to be someone who also went to school when I was there and can hit the three, can go inside, can go outside, and was very versatile and somebody that I'm going to need, and also can create a big lineup and also can play against a small guard. I'm going with Mike Dunleavy.
Great pick.
Yeah, that's a great pick.
He was next on my board.
Yeah,
good one. I feel like I am still missing big size, and Boozer and Sheldon Williams are both off the board at this point. So I've sort of got a debate going on between like taking a good shifty guard or taking big size. I do have 2 good rebounders for their size already, so I'm down to a couple dudes. Yeah, let's go with rebounding. I'm going to take Mason Plumlee.
Okay, that's a good one. I like that one. All right, what do you got, Jason?
So I need a point guard still because I've got JJ and I've got Carlos.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Am I taking Nolan Smith or John Shire? So I've got a key question for you. Are we just getting this guy in like his best year, or do we take like his whole career, or how does that work?
You take whole. You can explain it however you want, but I was going with whole career. But you can explain it however you want.
I mean, if I can take Nolan Smith's senior year, I'm taking that. If I'm going a whole career, I'm taking John Shire. So you tell me. You're in charge of this thing.
Okay, so we're going to do whole career since we were talking about jersey retirements. That encompasses a whole career, so we're going to talk about a whole career.
And I have John Shire.
John Shire. All right. Because you did that, I'm taking Nolan Smith as my 4th pick. Because, and here's the thing.
He wasn't very good as a freshman and sophomore.
Yeah, I love Chris Duhon. I love his distribution, but I think with this team, I need someone who can distribute as well as score, and Nolan Smith fits that bill. So, Sam, who you guys your 4th pick?
All right, I know I need a guard at this point because I've got Jason Williams, I've got Kyle Singler, and I've got Mason Plumlee. There's a couple of guards that I'm looking at that I feel like are versatile enough to play for me. Chris Duhon, as you guys mentioned, is certainly on there. It's really between him and you know what? I'm going to go with Chris Duhon.
That's a good pick. Shout out my man Chris.
I got a couple other dudes that I'm thinking about, but yeah, big fan of Chris Duhon's.
Hey, right. Can I point out something about Chris Duhon that's going to blow people's minds as they remember him? Chris Duhon averaged, as a senior, his last year, he averaged exactly 10 points per game, just barely by 1 point. Mm-hmm. He snuck into the double-digit scoring category. This dude was not a scorer.
But he was.
But I have Kyle Singler and Mason Plumlee and Jason Williams on my team.
Yeah.
So I've got.
Here's the thing: he also played on teams where he wasn't called on to be a primary or secondary or even a 3rd or 4th scorer. He was just called on to pass the ball and let guys like Shane Battier and Jason Williams and
Luol Deng and JJ Redick.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right, Jason, who's your 4th one?
So I feel like I need a wing. I've got a point guard, I've got a shooting guard, I've got a big man. I feel like I need a wing, and I'm really trying to decide here. I think I'm going Gerald Henderson.
Damn it. I was going to pick him because that's a good pick because, you know, sometimes you need someone who just needs to dunk the life out of the place. And Sam knows what I'm talking about. Sometimes Gerald Henderson is called on to dunk the life out of the place.
It's true.
That would have been a great
That's what he does.
For me. But unfortunately, Jason, you got him. So now you have me scrambling a little bit. Who am I going to pick? So right now I have I have some good shooting. I have some good inside presence. I have some good versatility. But what I'm going to do, this might be little controversial, but I'm going to go with somebody who's a glue guy. And I already have the quintessential glue guy, Shane Battier, but I need another glue guy who's just going to do the dirty work, no questions asked. I'm going Emil Jefferson.
It's a good pick. He was going to be my 5th pick. Good job, man.
Yeah.
So my concern right now, so I've got a center in Mason Plumlee. I've got a forward in Kyle Singler. The question is he a power forward or a small forward? If he's a power forward, then I can afford to take another guard. And there's one in particular that I'm very much thinking about taking. The question is, do I take one more guard or do I take one more big man? And I guess, yeah, I think I like his versatility. I think I like his rebounding at his position. I'm pretty happy in general with my rebounders. And I think at this point I'm getting all national champions. I'm going to go with Grayson Allen.
All right.
For my 5th pick.
I cannot be mad at that pick either. That's a pretty good pick. All right, Jason, last pick. Who do you got?
So there are still some really, really good Blue Devils left. And by the way, Grayson Allen was far and away the highest guy left on my board. Seth Curry, we haven't picked yet. Quinn Cook, we haven't picked yet. Daniel Ewing, we haven't picked yet.
Wait, Jason.
Yes.
Daniel Ewing just got another technical.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But I need another big man. And I know we said we're taking career. I'm taking Greg's. Yeah.
Don't say Greg Kubek. You were about to say Greg Kubek.
I almost did. I'm taking Brian Zubek. Senior year. His senior year. I'm just taking his senior year.
Hey, you know what? He dunked again. You have a couple guys. He dunked so hard against Xavier his senior year that CBS in a regular season game treated it like the NCAA tournament and switched to another game. That's awesome. Okay.
I can't believe that Seth Curry, Quinn Cook, and Daniel Ewing didn't get picked.
Well,
Miles
as I said,
Plumlee and Ryan Kelly also didn't get picked.
Yeah, as I said, and there's a lot of guys who, like I said in our pregame talk, there's a lot of guys who end up on the cutting room floor from this. That just tells you how many great players we've had over the years. And again, this only encompassed players that played at least 3 years. It does not talk about all the guys who played 1 or 2 years that easily would have supplanted a lot of these guys on these lists. So,
hey guys, I got a quick question for you.
Mm-hmm.
If we could take anybody, would you have taken Zion first?
I think I would.
Yeah,
he's the most versatile player. He can basically do everything. I think any player in Duke history, and if I'm just picking one season of his, I'm either taking Zion Williamson's freshman year or I'm taking Christian Laettner's senior year. I think that's pretty much it on the best seasons list for me. Donald?
Yeah, I would say if I could take Zion's freshman year or Kyrie Irving's first 8 games,
Kyrie Irving's first 8 games were.
Those are, I mean, honestly, too. Like the most electric, the most amazing performance I've ever seen from a Duke player before this year was Kyrie against Michigan State, and Zion had 14 better ones this year, probably. So yeah, I would definitely have taken him first.
All right. I keep on trying to talk myself into JJ Redick's senior year, which was ridiculous. Or Shane Battier, who was the best defensive player we've probably ever seen at Duke. But man,
then Zion Williamson appeared.
He was so good on both ends of the floor.
He won National Defensive Player of the Year 3 times, and Zion would have won everything if he was nominated. But he wasn't even nominated.
Yeah.
So we'll never have that. Okay, so to recap, and thank you, John Blocker, for this question, which spurred this little draft thing. I have in my starting 5, Shane Battier, Sheldon Williams, Mike Dunleavy, Nolan Smith, and Emil Jefferson. Sam has Jason Williams, Kyle Singler, Mason Plumlee, Chris Duhon, and Grayson Allen. And Jason rounds us out with JJ Redick, Carlos Boozer, John Shire, Gerald Henderson, and Brian Zubek. But guys, one thing that I think is common about all 3 of these teams is all 3 of these teams would have won this year's national championship.
Oh yeah, yeah, you sure?
Oh no, Jason's team is littered with guys who didn't win national championships.
and they would have
Uh,
won this year.
So I don't know.
Wait.
Donald's team is interesting.
Hey, Carlos Boozer's wearing a ring. So is John
No, I know.
Shire.
And so is
What do you mean
Brian
littered
Zubek,
with non? Yeah.
Well, relative to our teams that only have national champions on them, you have 2 non-national champions. Donald and I collectively have 0. So that's a mark against you. Although one of your guys is JJ Redick. Donald's team is interesting. I feel like because it's got a lot of size. You've got Mike Dunleavy. Mike Dunleavy is your shooting guard, and Nolan Smith is your point guard. So that's a big team. That's like. They're real big. They'll probably get a lot more rebounds than my team will. I like my team's athleticism though. I feel like you guys are gonna get rocked by my team's athleticism. Everyone on my team can run the floor. Everyone can dunk. Everyone can get around real fast. I feel like I got a shifty team. I'm happy about them, and they all rebound well. They all rebound well.
I don't know, Sam. I'll be honest. I think you've got the weakest team. Mason really didn't come on till his senior year. I already mentioned Duhan is not much of a scorer.
I have Jason Williams and Grayson Allen and Kyle Singler.
Yeah, that's true. Jay Will was unstoppable at times.
Mm-hmm. I've got plenty of scoring. I'm not worried about scoring. Chris Duhan only has to facilitate, and he knows how to facilitate next to Jason Williams.
Just put it this way: Shane Battier had one of the greatest seasons ever his senior year, and was not a consensus National Player of the Year because of Jason Williams.
Right.
And brother.
Yeah. That dude was hot.
Yeah.
So I don't know how we're going to decide. If people want to tell us which of these teams they prefer, I obviously like them all. But I'm rolling with my guys, because they're my guys.
Right.
So that was a great question from John. Donald, I'll send it back to you. I know you've got one more to read for us, right?
Yes, I do. And this one comes from Adrian Turner, who probably has the question of the year. It's a great question, and one that I know we have discussed and back and forth, and people in the forums as well. It's been a recurring debate over the last few years. So Adrian writes, I have been an advocate of the one and done talent, especially since the 2015 title. But after this year, I firmly believe we need to change our approach. I keep going back to that 2010 title team who had 9 5-star players on that roster and were full of mainly juniors and seniors. I think landing Matthew Hurt on next year's team, incoming recruit who we're targeting, would be a drastic mistake and bad for player development for players like Joey Baker and Jack White. I would really like to see them add a guy and get more guys who would be here 3 to 4 years. So, Sam, I'm going to start with you. This is basically the one and done debate, and really, where do you stand? And obviously, we've had some years where one and done has worked. We've had some years that one and done has fallen well short. So where are you at today?
I think that the challenge here, and Adrian brings it up, is that there's less continuity for the guys who are talented enough to be the 4-year players. I'm thinking about the Alex O'Connells and the Joey Bakers, and even honestly at this point, the Marquise Boldens, who don't necessarily get the kind of playing time early in their careers that a Shane Battier got, or that a Kyle Singler got, that led them to be as productive as they were, in their junior and senior seasons. I think that's the trickiest part about the one and done, is that you're putting these guys in a kind of in a tough position where they don't know exactly when they're going to get the playing time. There's obviously still something to be said for getting to play next to, big NBA talent and getting to go up against the Zions and the RJ Barretts in practice. But I think there's a point where if you have too many of them, and Duke is probably at that position now, where it makes it hard to have continuity in the program and have guys learn and stick around and get better year to year. You see not only Duke having more players leave for the pros these days, but also more players transferring. No one has this year, but at this point, it's like more often than not that Duke is having players transfer. We're always talking about it on this show, about all the guys who were leaving, and wouldn't it be great if they still had this guy or still had that guy? That comes up, I think, more than we particularly care for. I think the other thing that I mentioned last year when Zion Williamson committed, and this was sort of before we knew what a what a outlandish basketball player Zion Williamson was going to be. But when he committed, I believe my reaction at the time was like, all right, whatever, like I'll see him next year. I don't really, I'm sort of numb to all the new players at this point. It feels like a burden as a fan to be constantly having to like relearn who the players are and see the one class go out and the next guys come in. I don't know. It's sort of overwhelming for me, and I don't see as much of the continuity. And I think it sort of coincided with Duke deciding to go with the whole brotherhood branding. I think that's somewhat in an attempt to kind of paint over the way that the program's had a lot of turnover in recent years.
You're not one and done until you actually go after 1 year. I mean, if you think about it, Marquise Bolden was viewed as a one and done player when he got to Duke. He's not obviously a one and done player. Tre Jones was viewed as a one and done player. We now know he's coming back for a second year. And even, I mean, yes, Zion and RJ and Cam are expected to go, but they're not one and done until they actually declare. Now we expect them to, but it's sort of this thing where people want us to get all the top recruits in the country and then keep them 4 to 5 years. And that's just not how the system is set up. The guys who are in college that are the top, 5, 10 recruits, and even some further down, believe that they have the talent to go to the NBA and that this is just a stopgap on the way to that goal. And really, with a win now environment, fans don't have the luxury, coaches don't have the luxury of waiting because fans demand that you win now. You win the games, win with the talent you have in front of you. And especially when it's Duke. No one is going to expect Duke to get, a few top 80 recruits and, have a second round knockout and then maybe a Sweet 16 and build up to a national championship. Every single year, people do not care who we have on our team. Our haters want us out in the first round, and our fans want to see us win a national championship. That's how it is. And I think at this point, Coach K has decided in his latter years, because I think we've said he's in his last 5 years for about 5 years now. But in these last years that he has as in his coaching career, he wants to work with the best players possible. He's not going to the NBA. He's not coaching Team USA anymore. So he is going to go out and get the best possible players that he can and try to see if he can take those guys and win with those guys. But at the end of the day, people are going to have to make the decision of, do you want 3 to 4 year guys, or do you want guys who are the best talents that we've seen? If we had lost, do you think anyone would have not gone after Zion Williamson, knowing that he's probably going to go after a year and be the number one pick? Absolutely not. Every single team in the country would want Zion Williamson on their team. And that is the reality. Those type of guys are going to leave after a year for the most part. I'm not saying all of them, but for the most part, they are all going to go. And keep in mind, guys, UNC has 2 one-and-dones on their team this year. They had been talking all year about how they're a family, about how their guys never leave, about how they stay and they play and they win national championships and they leave a legacy. Well, Kobe White and Nasir Little are both gone. And to this point, as we record, we have 0 one-and-dones on our team. So that is just something that people are going to have to take. And as the system evolves, then we can have this discussion a little bit further. But I think when we're talking about going to strive to be the best, that means going out and trying to get the best possible recruits under the risk that we only have them for 1 year.
So here's where I am on this. First of all, I have an appeal. I want to say something to the entire world of Duke fandom. Please stop judging one done by whether or not we win a national title. We just had a discussion a couple minutes ago where we talked about the luck that goes into winning the national title. Virginia pulled a 4 in 10,000 shot out, and as a result, they won a national title this year. Duke didn't, and so we didn't. So stop judging us only by whether we win a national title. Let me tell you what the one-and-done era has been like at Duke. We've been winning ACC tournaments like crazy. We are consistently in the top 5 in the rankings all season long. Hey, guys, what are the worst seasons we've had over the past decade? There have been like maybe 3 years in the past decade where you went you know what? I don't think this Duke team can win a national title. All the other years, we could have won a national title. Those 3 years, Jabari Parker, one and done. Austin Rivers, one and done. And Brandon Ingram, one and done. Those are the years we only had one and done player. When Duke has 2 or 3 or 4 one and done players, we make the Elite Eight or we win a national title. That's the reality. Look at the stats. Go back and look at how these Duke teams have performed. You put 3 or 4 first-round NBA draft picks on a Duke team, and they go deep in the tournament and they win an ACC tournament, and they are among the best teams in the country. Yeah, I'm sorry. We got a little unlucky. Michigan State ran a great play and hit a desperation 3, and then things didn't work out for us at the other end, and so we lost. But you know what? Don't judge one and done only by national titles. That's number one. Number 2 is I actually have a solution for all of this. And my solution is this. Even though I just talked about how Duke's done really well when we had 3 and 4 one and done kind of players, I'd like to see us ratchet back a little tiny bit, like what we have coming in this coming season in 2019, where we got one and done, maybe 2 in Vernon Carey and Wendell Moore. If we add Matthew Hurt, that would be 2.5, 3. I'd like to see us be in that kind of range where we're not really loading up on like 4 guys, where it's 2 or 3 one and done guys, because I think it gives us a little more room to develop one more player. And I think if we develop one more player a year, a guy who's not one and done, a guy who's, a top 30 or a top 40 recruit as opposed to a top 10, I think that that's a situation where Duke is getting the best, but we're also developing new guys. And the last thing I'll have to say about all this, you guys already said it, but I think it's worth stressing again. Coach K wants to coach the best players. We want to see the best players at Duke. And the utter joy of watching Zion Williamson this season, it would have been unbelievably tragic if after we signed RJ Barrett and Cam Reddish, if Duke backed off of Zion Williamson because we've already got 2 stud one and dones. Tre Jones looks like he might be a third. We're not going to go for another one. What a tragedy. How sad it would have been if we didn't get this season from Zion Williamson. And these guys turn into amazing ambassadors for Duke in the NBA and elsewhere. I mean, the whole country knows the first time they were exposed to Marvin Bagley, to Jason Tatum, to Kyrie Irving, to RJ Barrett, to Zion Williamson. The first time they got to know those players was when they wore a Duke uniform. And that's a really good thing. And that keeps Coach K very, very happy. And I want to keep Coach K happy.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this team without Zion Williamson. What do you think? They're a 3 or 4 seed probably without Zion Williamson, especially given the way that they played without him. I mean, as good as RJ Barrett was, this team really lacked the team this season really lacked shooting. And outside of Tre Jones, didn't have a reliable defender. So yeah, the Zion factor is huge for this team. Donald, why don't you finish this up and then we'll take the show down.
Yeah, and I think Jason, you kind of alluded to it when we're talking about how these guys are great ambassadors for the program. The brotherhood, as you said, Sam, is a brand that is well renowned now. And when you think about it, let's go back to the haters for a second. All the haters were really, really hoping that we lost in the first round, the second round, in the Sweet 16, and then eventually the Elite Eight. They were all clamoring for our demise. But how many of those same people were tuning in every single night to watch Zion Williamson and RJ Barrett play? How many people who are fans of NBA teams who hate Duke but are hoping that their teams tank for Zion or RJ Barrett or even Cam Reddish, who is projected to be a lottery pick as well? All of these guys at the end of the day, when they go into the NBA, I mean, Marvin Bagley is having a terrific year, rookie season for Sacramento. And most people forget he played for Duke because Zion Williamson is there and RJ Barrett is there. So at the end of the day, those guys carry the Duke brand and they carry the Duke name wherever they go. Whenever they are introduced in an arena from here on out for the rest of their career, it will be Zion Williamson, 6'8" forward or 6'6" forward, Duke. It's going to be that name that carries us. And that is why when we go after these players, yeah, they may leave after 1 year, but we have to appreciate the time that we have with them while they're here.
All right. And I think that is going to do it for today on the Duke Basketball Report podcast. No players of the week, as we are now fully in off-season mode. Feel free to send us more emails at dbrpodcast@gmail.com. I think we had some fun discussions today, and we'll hopefully keep those going. Of course, if there's any news breaking from Duke on the NBA draft front, on the recruiting front, any of that stuff, we will be back here to talk about it, and be, of course, analyzing the draft prospects of our guys as the draft gets nearer in June. So stick around, and into the offseason, I think we've been good every offseason of at least staying in about a once a month clip, just depending on how the news piles up. So don't forget to refresh. Keep checking DukeBasketballReport.com and of course the forums where we like to hang out. I think Jason and Donald do a little bit more hanging out there than I do, but we're all there. We're all checking it all the time. And once again, of course, thank you to our sponsors, Byrd Campbell, BYRDCAMPBELL.com. Byrd Campbell means business. They, of course, have been the longtime sponsor of this show, and will continue to be even into the off season. So with that, for Jason Evans in Atlanta and for Donald Wine up in Washington, D.C., I am Sam Klein, coming to you from Durham. This has been episode 158 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. Duke Band, take us home.